Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Dads Podcast. My name is Paul Fagan, and I'm here with Jody Fisher. Hey, Jody.
Hello, Paul. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. This podcast is for all the dads out there who struggle with life's topics as they are related to family and finances. Our hope is that we can provide our thoughts, successes, and mistakes and share them with all of you. Today's topic, we're going to discuss money and marriage. And what does that exactly mean? And this is how to make sure that the two of you are on the same page when it comes to money and finances. My current situation, which has been in place for many, many years, even pre-marriage, was an equitable split of the finances. Before marriage, we were pretty much roommates, splitting up the expenses 50-50, and right down the middle. So when we were living in a small apartment in Queens, we had our household budgets for electric and rent and such, and we got a joint account at the time. And what we would do is initially fund that account with several $1,000s each, and then every month we would draw from that account, pay the bills, and then at the end of the month I would do a calculation in a spreadsheet and do an equitable split. And then we would each cut ourselves a check to ourselves, deposit into the joint account, and it was kind of a rinse and repeat style. Later on, when we got married, the split became more equitable. So based on income, I was making a little bit more than my wife, and over the years we adjust those splits as incomes go up and down. Right. So if I were making double what my wife is making, I would take that fair share of the equitable expense for the household, or vice versa. And funny enough, years later I found out in an article that I had researched on Oprah in O Magazine, she had recommended the exact style for couples to embrace is this equitable split of the expenses. And so basically we maintain three sets of accounts. I have my personal account, my wife has her personal accounts, and then we have our household accounts. And the household accounts include the joint checking and savings along with a joint credit card. So we have one credit card that's split that we use for the household, and then we have the checking and savings account, and we still do the same thing today. At the end of every month, I give her a bill, so to speak, and we still make those checks to each other. And the only reason why we still do checks, Jody, is because at the end of the day, the banks are still charging fees, especially from different banks, from bank to bank. There could be a fee involved. At least that's what we found. So if I try to deposit monies into my joint checking account, I get charged a fee on both sides, which I know sounds ridiculous, but that's how it is. So we actually physically write checks, and then now it's gotten even easier because I used to have to go to an ATM and make that deposit, and now I could take a picture on my phone, right, front and back of the check. The banks have finally come to a point where I could do that without any hassle. So that's how we work in terms of money and marriage. And Jody, what's your current situation when it comes to money and marriage?
Well, just a quick note on that. Isn't that life changing when you can snap a picture of a check and deposit it into your checking account? That's kind of amazing.
It is amazing. And the most amazing part about it was that technology has been there for the last several years, but only in the last year, 18 months, did the banks raise the limits enough for us to do that from a joint backfill of the accounts perspective. The household expenditures are reasonably high, I guess you would say, but that's for everybody, right? We are all in the same boat, right? We have electric, cable bills, other payments, and we're all in the same boat. So as those expenses arose, the banks weren't keeping up with it. So I think banks had a limit of like $1,000 that you could do in terms of a deposit on any given day into an account, and they finally raised the limits on all that stuff. So, but you're right. In short, I love the fact that I can not have to go to a bank anymore. No more brick and mortar unless it's an extreme situation in terms of opening an account or closing an account. But even then, you could do that all online, right? So it is pretty amazing.
I do visit the bank on a weekly basis to make some cash withdrawals in the scope of our budget. I take a couple bucks from this to pay for the landscaper, and this to pay the cleaning service, and that, to give my kids the allowance. And I do that because I need the smaller denominations, and also because if you do too many back with my bank at least. So if you do too many back and forth transfers, obviously withdrawal, you got to go into a bank. But if you do too many back and forth transfers, I've been hit with them actually closing an account. Have you ever experienced that?
No, I have not.
Automatically closing an account because it exceeds the number of transfers per statement period as defined by federal law. At least that's what I've been told by my bank on the 2 occasions that they have automatically closed one of my savings accounts.
Oh, interesting.
It is shocking. We're totally off topic here. It is shocking when you get that. And the first time I got it, I was like, WTF? What do you mean because I'm transferring money from my savings to my checking? And I think that's the direction it was, that you can put, if you transfer too many times out of your savings into another account, you only have a certain number of transactions in a given statement period. And I'm like, I'm moving my money from one account to the other. What the hell's wrong with you? But in any case, let's get back to money and marriage.
No, that's fine. That's probably banking and fees are probably something that we could talk about on a podcast, right? Those pitfalls.
Oh, no, we're going to rant about that.
Yeah.
At least
credit cards, late fees, the inevitable or the typical 0% down, and then if you miss a payment, it becomes retroactive 22% from the beginning of the loan. There's all kinds of games that the finance companies will play. So that's probably something that we'll take for another
Let's talk about
podcast.
that next time for sure, because
absolutely.
If I get going, I'm not going to stop.
Absolutely.
Well, back to the marriage and money piece, it's really interesting the way that you and your wife have decided to manage your finances. And what I heard you explaining there is the same thing as what we've experienced, sort of having a budget and a process that evolves over time to fit your needs. And I think that's the most important takeaway. If we're going to jump to the end of this podcast, the takeaway is making sure that you have a plan that adjusts and responds to the needs of your specific household. There's no one right way to do it, other than making sure that the math works. There's no one right way to do it.
Yep.
The way we've done it completely differently from you guys. We've commingled everything. So it's one checking account. It's a couple different savings account busted out by need. There's one savings account for the house. There's one for each of the kids. There's sort of the dream vacation, savings account that's often another institution where we toss money into that all the time. There's the savings account for the house where we're throwing money into that all the time. So there are different savings accounts, but in terms of the household budget, everything is in one pot and it's all on one spreadsheet. And we make sure that we are constantly talking to each other on what's coming in, what's going out, what we need to spend on this week, when we need to buy prescriptions or when that payment is coming up, and 99% of what's in that budget is just recurring. It's the monthly payments. So we both know what's in that spreadsheet and what's coming in and going out all the time. But we're to the point where it's somewhat mechanical and routine about the budget, where I'll wake up on a Friday morning, and before she's even got that first sip of coffee in her mouth, I whisper, "You got paid today," because I'm checking the account to make sure that it hit and make sure that it's the right number, and because again, I'm a detail guy and I'm a no surprises guy, and she's coming home to me and she's saying, "Okay, I spent X dollars on groceries," and we throw that in the spreadsheet, and okay, I'm going to go buy this, and we throw that in the spreadsheet, and it's all about just informing the spreadsheet. And I'm lucky because she's a data spreadsheet girl too. Mm-hmm. So it's nice that we can communicate in that way. And again, we've reached a place, we've figured this out where it works for both of us. Commingling it, we've created this process that works for both of us. And going back to what I started with, that's what you need to do. You need to create a process that works for you, no matter what that process is. If it works and the math is right, you're all good.
Yep, and you hit upon that topic of merge or not to merge, right? That's an important question. For us and me and my wife, everything is we prefer the method that we have. But if you talk to other financial, or you listen to other financial advisors, the prominent ones, the Dave Ramsey's of the world, the insistence on commingle is a must, right? Where just like you said, and it works very well in your situation. I'm not sure if it would work so well in my situation. My wife is I'm very active with the finances, and she's typically very passive. And if she were in the room with me, she would admit to that. She has most of her stuff on auto pay. She'll, at the end of the month, I actually fill out the check and just have her sign it to do the deposit. So she's very hands off. And the most important part about our financial situation is we've never fought about money, ever. Just there's no reason to, right? If I want to buy a new set of golf clubs or something within reason, I would just go do it. And same thing with her. If she wanted to buy something, she would just go buy it. Now, if it comes to cars or something really big, we would, of course, discuss those types of purchases, and we have in the past. But at the end of the day, I think for us, having the accounts independent gives us that freedom that we both desire, even though it's an illusion, right? And I always say that because it is an illusion, even though the accounts are separate. In the event of a divorce or something, which I'm just saying that out loud. We're nowhere near anything like that.
That would be the shock of the century.
Yeah, we're nowhere near that, right? But
you guys have been together for so long,
right? Exactly. And what I've said, and we both laugh about it, is like we could afford to get divorced, right? We have our independent financial lives with our independent retirements, and if we had to make a clean break, we could actually afford to get divorced, right? I would think that we could come to some reasonable and equitable decision of how to do that. And then whenever I joke about that, my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, she freaks out. So we don't talk about it anymore, right? We don't even joke about it because she doesn't want to even hear that word. But
forget it. Our kids, my wife and I are very animated conversationalists, if you haven't figured that out. Yeah. And we'll be having this animated conversation about, current events in the other room. And our kids will come running in the room and be like, "Are you guys okay?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
No, this is just the way Mom and I talk.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So we stopped talking about that aspect of it. But for us, it was very important to keep the financial independence. And I don't know why psychologically, but the reason why I say it's an illusion is because when it's all said and done, if there was some sort of dissolution, all the monies would be combined and the lawyers would figure it out and the judges would do some kind of split, right? And that's what typically happens. But getting off that topic, getting away from divorce, on a positive note, for us, we've always had a really good relationship when it came to the finances. And it's funny, I have another friend that was asking me about money and finances and how we did it. Because like you, Jody, most couples commingle the finances, and I think that's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's a great way to go. And a friend of mine was asking me how we do it, and I explained to him how we do it. And when he went to go talk to his future bride about it, it was a showstopper, right? There was no way that, in her mind, she felt that, nope, what's yours is yours, and no, what is that saying? What's yours is mine, and mine is yours.
Right.
Well,
the joke is what's yours is mine. What's yours is what is it? What's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine.
That's true too. That's what my buddy Lou says. My buddy Lou says if I ever get divorced, I'll get half my stuff back. And a big shout out to Big Lou. So it is kind of funny the way all that works. But I think it winds up being that give and take, right? And I know that one of the things, I want to flip the subject a little bit. Jody, you still, and we talked about this in other podcasts around the envelope system. So you still use that in terms of money and marriage, and it keeps everything clean in terms of having the segregated funds for each and every expenditure and that system. Can you talk a little bit about that for people who missed it in another podcast?
Sure. Well, I only use the envelope system for a couple of very specific things. We have a guy who cuts the grass every week, so there's an envelope system for that, and it's $40-$50 a week, every week, nonstop, round the calendar, and that takes care of that. We have a little envelope system for gifts. If you have kids, they're always getting invited to birthday parties, and those birthday parties can hit like 5 in a weekend, and suddenly you're out $200 or something. So we do a little envelope system for that. We also do an electronic envelope system, I guess if you can call it that, but we have all those different savings accounts that we've talked about. So constantly throwing a couple of bucks every week into this savings account and that savings account and that savings account to make sure that we are beefing those up and we're saving at the same time that some of those savings accounts function as an envelope to withdraw from if we have, baseball sign up, or somebody needs, new sneakers, or, something like that for the kids. We have that savings account for them that we can draw down on. We're never drawing out of that more than we're putting in on an annual basis. So that's always building up. It's never going down, at least we hope, cross fingers. Mm-hmm. But the idea is to constantly be saving there, like we said in that last podcast. And that gets us back to what you and I are both talking about here, which is creating a budget, creating a plan, being intentional with your money, and then communicating it. I think that's why some financial experts will talk about the need to commingle the finances, because what commingling does, and Paul, you're the exception here because you have successfully done this without commingling, is it forces communication. I think that money is the hardest thing for two people to talk about, with the exception of maybe religion or politics. Mm-hmm. It's very awkward it can be very awkward to talk about money with someone else where you've both got an equally valid opinion. And just because my wife and I commingle our finances doesn't mean that we always agree on everything. We've got to a point where now, we've been married as long as we've been married, and been, with each other longer than that, where we understand each other and we sort of have that give and take and prioritize. Okay, you need this thing, I need this thing. We both want that thing. We both are going to need to live without the other thing. That kind of stuff. We can have that conversation. When you're starting out like that, it can be very awkward. So like you were talking about your friend. You've got to have the communication about how we're going to deal with the finances. I feel like you've got to have someone who takes the lead. With my wife and I, it's me. And by taking the lead, it just means, okay, I'm the one who's managing the spreadsheet. I'm the one who's making sure the bills are getting paid on time. I'm doing all that stuff. But she has just as active a role in the conversation about how we spend that money as I do. And I would say that she's got 51% of the conversation, just to be safe. But that's really the whole thing is communication, making sure that you're talking to each other about how you're managing the money that you have. Because if you don't have that conversation, you've got two separate tracks. You both might be spending a little bit more than you have, or you might be spending a little bit of the other one's money, or however that works out. And suddenly you turn around and there's no money for food, or there's no money for the utility bill, or whatever there's no money for. So it's the conversation part really that's important. It's not so much of the mechanics of how you manage the money, but it's the conversation around how you manage the money.
Yeah, I agree with you. If we commingled the money, I think our communication would be better between us, and I also feel that we may be more ahead in terms of financial savings. But, and this is a big but, all this works for us. Right, so I'm afraid to touch it, and I think that my wife is fiercely independent with her finances and herself and all her endeavors, I should say, right, when it comes to work or personal, and even to the point where the only thing I think we argued about at one point was getting the logins to her accounts so I can look at the balances for the financial family spreadsheet, right? And maybe that's the only time where it wasn't really a disagreement, but it took a little doing to get that information into a centralized place so I can effectively manage the finances, right? And I don't think it was a trust thing. I just think she was so used to being on her own with these types of things that it took her a while to kind of warm up to the idea. But it was a long time ago.
It's almost like a calling into question of the other person's ability to do the thing that they've been doing forever before you came along, right?
That's true.
And so it's like, well, I've been doing this for a while. I'm fine. What are you worried about? What do you need to log in for? It's almost like that. It's not even like you said, it's not even what are you looking at my stuff, or I want to hide something from you. It's more like I know how to do this. It's like tying your shoes, right? What do you got to tie my shoes for? I know how to tie my shoes. Leave me alone. It's that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you just gave me a light bulb moment. Maybe I really do think that probably that's what it is or was. But it was quickly squashed, and now I have everything that's needful in the one spreadsheet that allows me to take a look at all the balances. And every once in a while I'll show her, at the macro level, the retirement fund totals and the savings totals and shared debt totals, etc. But once again, she's very passive with that. I believe she believes, hey, it's well in hand, things are good. You'll let me know if things are bad, and let's just keep going, right? So that's good from that perspective. But I think getting back to the commingling, which I know a lot of couples do, and I think it's a great way to do it. I think that if we were to do it, we might be ahead in some things, but I think overall, if the way our personalities are, I think it would cause more financial fights for us. And I believe you're right. I think we're the exception to that rule, because most people will commingle and not worry about it. To kind of flip to another topic, joint savings. Do you guys? So you guys are putting everything into the same savings account, but you also have separate retirement accounts. How do you track all those pieces? Are you equal in terms of putting the same percentage of money into your 401ks? And are you on the same page with those types of pieces as well?
We would be if we were fully funding our 401ks in the way that we probably should at this point in our lives. Mm-hmm. It's a function of, our job situations, and she's not doing a 401k right now. She's got an IRA that's pretty well beefed up from past jobs, but she's not actively funding that. I am actively funding a 401k, but I've also drained my IRA down, and this is from a past podcast, drained my IRA down fairly low, although it is coming back nicely, I'm happy to say. But we don't get too ramped up about equally funding retirement counts and things like that. What we really just focus on is communicating clearly about the overall household budget. And I'm going to set retirement savings off for the purposes of this conversation right now. And we're making sure that we are we're putting the money in the buckets that we need to put them in right now to make sure the budget is balanced, and we're making the progress that we want to make. It also touches or brings up another thing that we've talked about in the past, which is making sure that when you're saving for things, you're saving for a purpose. Yeah, it's good to just be, chunking money away into a savings account just to beef up, whether it's an emergency fund or something like that. But after a while, you've also got to identify the thing that you're saving for. And to me, that is another part of the conversation when you're talking about money and marriage. You have to have a conversation about, okay, we're taking this money, here's this savings line, and we're putting this money in this account. What are we doing that for? What's it going to go towards? Is it going to go towards a vacation? Is it going to go towards, Paul, you talked about, golf clubs or some other thing that we want to get, some other toy, which is all great. We all need toys. We all want to have fun, right? We work hard, we make money, we deserve to have fun on the scale that we want to have fun. So making sure that you're saving for something. That's another great conversation starter in marriages or with couples about how you're using your money. Making sure that you're talking about, and dreaming together about, hey, we're going to save this money so we can go on this trip, or we can, make this improvement to the house, or we can buy this car, do whatever the thing we want to do. It goes back to communication. You got to communicate. You got to talk with each other about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And that way you identify the things you want to spend on, the things you want to cut back on. Hey, you know what, this week we don't need to spend that thing, because then we can take that money and we can throw it in that account, or we can do something else that we've wanted to do this week. It's really comes down to communication and talking about why you're doing what you're doing so you can make progress together.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think for us, we have those conversations typically over dinner without the kids. I'll start talking about trips or college funding, and we'll have those types of conversations, offline, so to speak, outside the house. That's typically where we have our financial conversations when it comes to money, and that's probably because you don't want, for us, we don't talk too much about money in front of the kids, right? It's still something that we want to keep abstracted from them. As my son has gotten older, and maybe this is another podcast topic, right, is to kind of talk about how to talk to your kids about money, right, and how they should learn about money, right? So that's something we'll talk about in a future podcast. But in general, when it comes to major conversations about our finances, we do it outside of the kids' ears. So that's something that we've always done. And then one last point, which I'm going to circle back to the envelope system. We also have the envelope system, but we have one envelope, and we keep that envelope in the office, and I backfill it every month, and that is the slush fund, right? So like you said, babysitter money, daycare money, whatever's needful comes out of that envelope. And I have to go to the bank once a month to do that withdrawal as well. So I think it's something that we're both on the same page with. But once again, as we've talked about in other podcasts, you're managing it at the micro level, I'm managing it at the macro level, but both work. And I think that comes down to what we talked about before, and I think it's time to kind of go through the recap, right? So like you said at the beginning of the podcast, Jody, do what's best for you, whether you're commingling the money or you're keeping finances separate in a structured fashion. Do what's the most comfortable and works for your marriage, right? And then keep the lines of communications open. Make sure you're talking and discussing, especially the major financial topics in your lives, whether that's retirement, saving for that dream trip, college funding, a new car expenditure, looking at a new home, etc. And then having those goals, right? Those savings goals, being on the same page in terms of you both want this type of new car, or you both want to take this trip with the family. So making sure that you have your goals aligned with each other. Anything else to recap on, Jody?
Now, Paul, you hit it. Communication is key. If you communicate, you'll win. If you don't communicate, you'll lose.
Well said. Well said. Well, Jody, I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion today, and I'm personally looking forward to the next one. Thanks, everyone, for downloading our podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at financialdads@gmail.com or check us out on Facebook. Just go to financialdads.com. So with that, this is Paul and Jody reminding you, managing finances can be stressful, but that's why the Financial Dads are here to help you plan for success. Have a good one, everybody. Be well, and thank you.